We're here today to talk about moonshots, and we have two experts who have been spreading the knowledge of moonshots and enabling teams to do great things that are moonshot caliber. And you might be asking yourself, what exactly is a moonshot? And I'm going to leave that to Bill and Armin, who are going to explain accurately what it is and what it can do. From my perspective, a moonshot reminds me of John F. Kennedy when he challenged our nation, United States, to send a person to the moon and return them safely. And that back then was seen as a near impossible thing to do. Some similar examples would have been the early explorers who crossed the Atlantic, not knowing if there was anything on the other side, or if they would fall off the end of the earth and die. Some other people that come to mind more recently are the bold innovators like Steve Jobs, who invented this whole ecosystem of products and services and experiences. And more recently, Elon Musk, who has had great vision and is always announcing and executing what we think are impossible things. So my perspective is, what I've heard about moonshots in an innovation context, and that's really where Bill and Armin are coming from, is coming from Stanford, and being deeply saturated in the innovation processes there. It's not being satisfied working on things that give you only 10% improvement, but aiming for outcomes that are going to improve something by 10 times. 10 times versus 10%. So that's my layperson's explanation of that. So while we were launching some design thinking programs in the SV Forum 100 community, we encountered Bill and Armin and were greatly impressed with the programs that they have put in place and have taken around the globe. So without any further ado, I want to hand the floor over to Bill. Bill?
Hey, Mark. So welcome this morning, everybody. And I saw a couple people putting in, it looks like a California crew, but I know we have internationally and we've got people from across the US. So I hope you have a tea or something to listen for a little bit. What Armand and I wanted to do was introduce what we've been doing. And let me wind the story back. When I got to California 30 years ago, I'm an immigrant from the East Coast to the US. I was utterly amazed with the kind of big thinking that was going on in Silicon Valley. As Mark mentioned, I'm of the generation that looked up to the founders of Atari. I remember when Steve Jobs was young Steve Jobs, what I call hippie Steve Jobs, when he had the long hair. And I remember as a kid just being radically inspired by these guys. The people that were trying to do things that changed the world were the reason I went to California. And there's a Steve Jobs quote from long ago that he believed that the people in California were just somehow more open to really new, amazing, radical ideas. So I've been in the Valley for 30 years. And along that time, I've gotten to see the rise of people who really push the boundaries. And that's kind of what we built Moonshots out of. I had experience early on at Apple. I got to run into Steve. I had experience later during the .com and ran into a lot of people that we all know and love today, the PayPal mafia, people that came out of Netscape, people that have gone on to do a lot of the venture capital today. And in all cases, these were people who, they weren't just doing small problems. They weren't saying, how do we do lean startup? They weren't saying, how do we do design thinking? They weren't looking at how to just engineer. What they were trying to figure out was, how do you build a mindset where you can get people to follow you? How do you build vision? How do you build a vision that's then credible and you could work with? So about 15, 20 years ago, I ended up at Stanford University. I did my doctorate there. And my doctorate was in how do people create these amazing new teams that can really change the world. I got invited to teach at Stanford. And what we started teaching was what at the time was called foresight. I come out of the group that does design thinking. So if you've ever heard of the big craze in user-centered design or design thinking, this is actually the world I come from. It's also what I came out of in the Silicon Valley. Early on, I was doing work in how do you look at the user? How do you look at the customer? What's interesting, though, is I was saying, well, how do we look at the customer? How do we keep our eye intently focused on the customer? But also, how do we take the long view? And I was somewhat happy when in 1997, 1998, this young CEO by the name of Jeff Bezos wrote his first letter to his shareholders. And I don't know if you've read it, but it's repeated pretty regularly. And Jeff Bezos, this young CEO at the time, he had this new company called Amazon. He said in his letter to the people, look, every day I'm going to challenge my team to build and invent the future. Every day we're going to ask ourselves when we wake up, how do we want a better future and how are we going to get there? And he said, we're going to do this two ways. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to focus on the customer. We're going to very intently look at people, but we're not going to look at people today. We're not just going to ask what would they like to have. What we're going to do is we're going to look at people with the long view. So if you go back and read Jeff's letter, you'll kind of see an inkling of what Mark was mentioning has been around for centuries. It was the people who looked out over the horizon and said, why don't we go there? How do we take this almost impossible idea and how do we make it possible? So Jeff Bezos put that in his letter in 97. It's a great piece of material that we love sharing with young people because young people, they can ask these crazy ideas. They don't have this inbuilt aversion to new ideas or to knowing. What they don't know how to do is young people tend not to know how to get there, and they tend not to know what the long view is. It's very hard to ask an 18-year-old to look 20 years in the future. So what we did at Stanford was we took that kind of moonshot thinking, the version that Jeff Bezos said, let's look at customers and let's look at the long view. A few years later, another set of young CEOs by the name of Sergey and his buddy over at this new company called Google, they wrote a very similar letter. And they also had this same view, which is every day we're going to try and imagine a better future. And then we're going to imagine how we get back from it. So what we've done at the university and what we've taken around the world is trying to say, let's help students not just to look at the problems as they exist today, but let's help them jump to the future and put themselves in this situation where they say, imagine we did lead the change. Imagine we've already succeeded. How would we have gotten there? And what would we have done along the way? So we built this program that's led from the future. It's a very different stance, and most of you as adults will recognize it. It's envisioning the future. It's an envisioning an end goal where you say, I'm going to achieve something very significant. And then saying, well, let's imagine we did it. What did we do to get there? Armand, when he came into the program, his real ability was to say, let's push the young people even further that we deal with. Let's not ask them just to achieve a slightly better world. He's young. I mean, as you can see, I'm the old gray hair guy here. Armand's the young guy. His view was, well, let's just ask the students to radically change the world. So in Silicon Valley these days, you may hear that there's a mantra, move fast and break things. That's kind of fallen out of fashion in the last year or two. Our mantra is very much move fast and fix things. We have the students developed an ability and a mindset to really change things in a very positive way. So to be concrete, what we did in the school was we built a new way of thinking. It was a mindset. If you are an engineer, you know what engineering thinking is. If you're a historian, you understand how to take a historian's view of what you're looking at from data. The mindset from a moonshot person is the future is achievable. Any future we imagine, we could achieve. So then we built a set of tools underneath it to say, well, if we could imagine an amazing future, how would we do it? And how as young people would we do it in particular? So we've been using the Moonshot system off campus for about the last 15 years under different names. We've worked with governments. We've worked with large organizations from Airbus to, who else we've been working with recently, Armand? I'm trying to think what other companies we played with recently.
I mean, we did play with Microsoft a little bit.
Microsoft doing some stuff,
Yeah.
and Microsoft may be part of our program if we do things later in the year. We just got contacted by Microsoft. They have a new challenge out, a radical challenge to change the world. And they've invited us to bring any of our Moonshot teams to this challenge. We recently went and worked with some of what Eric Schmidt's team was doing. So Eric Schmidt, ex of Google, he now has a new group called Schmidt Ventures. And Schmidt Ventures was just launched after he left Google. And its whole goal is to empower young teams to imagine how these huge world-changing ideas. So he launched his first one in September of this last year, where it was, could you reimagine and radically change learning in young people? Well, we took that idea, we built a whole series of teams around it. And interestingly, a number of our teams actually won the first stage and moved on. And 2 of those teams are now startups that are out fundraising right now from the likes of Emerson Collective. If you recognize Lauren Powell Jobs, that's Steve Jobs' wife, she runs a huge, huge program that's, again, trying to change the world. Armand led some work around the James Dyson Award. If you guys recognize, James Dyson is the billionaire inventor of vacuum cleaners out of the UK. And he actually runs a yearly challenge to get students to, again, look very far out there. Armand led a team or 2 in doing that with the Moonshot mindset. And curiously enough, one of our teams actually won in the international program. So we have a team out of Sweden that, curiously enough, and this isn't public, but they were just contacted this week by the largest competitor in their entire industry. So this is 5 guys in Sweden that did this amazing moonshot, and they got contacted by the largest competitor this week. And the company said to them, we'd love to invest in you. We love what you're doing. You guys have a vision that we didn't think anyone else had, particularly young people. So we've worked with that kind of program. And this gets back to this mindset. Once we've given young people the ability to say, we're going to change the world, we give them the tools to do it. The tools start with envisioning. They move on to things like, how do you find that customer that Jeff Bezos tells you to look for? It goes a little further on and starts looking at, how do you take almost impossible ideas and begin to plan for them? So we begin to do back planning. If any of you seen, there's a new book on Amazon, and its approach to how they envision and build the future. And they use something called a back plan. We've been using that tool for a handful of years, probably 10 years. And we teach it. We show people how to actually do it. So the whole Moonshots model is, let's give people the power to change the world, no matter who they are. And lately, in the last couple of years, and I'd say it's about 3 years ago, I met Armand when he came in as a young moonshot candidate into our program, and he immediately became a core piece of our program and has been hustling a lot of these students to go from just envisioning. And what I tend to work with is, now, how would you imagine and plan it? And then Armand's been taking the teams even further and turning them into projects at universities, projects in high schools, projects that are actually turning into these companies we're talking about. So Armand, how many Moonshots teams were you working with since Christmas time?
Wow, since Christmas, honestly, I probably want to say 10, 15. Like, we've had so many people coming through and so many teams doing such amazing work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and every
it's been
one
a
of
while.
these teams, they were people that started out with the moonshot mindset. They came together as a team. They came up with this radical view of the future, and just, instead of just telling us the idea, they told us how they were going to do it. And then they supported, Armand took them and spun a number of them out, and they've been working since about December 1 up until lately. These are real startups now. They've been turning them into real teams and real companies. Some of the teams are still in college. Some of the teams are outside of college. But this is what we're really trying to do. Mindset, a skill set, and a tool set to change the world. The people that we have the students aspire to, we have them look at stories of Walt Disney. You might recognize the guy who started the company. He gave an absolutely amazing investor pitch in 1965, 66. It was literally an investor pitch that he broadcast on American television. Well, we have copies of it, and we walk through it. And the part that's so enervating for students is that it's a visionary investor pitch. He doesn't say, give me a little bit of money and I'm going to go find a couple customers. He says, we are going to change the world, and would you like to join us? It's the same pitch that we have from Steve Jobs talking about back in the early 80s. He gave a talk at De Anza, Foothill De Anza College. He was giving a talk, and he talked about, how do you really imagine changing things? And this is Steve Jobs in 81, 82, right? So he'd done the Apple. He hadn't done Macintosh yet. And it was 10 years before he came back from the next desert. and started on the iPhone path. But he begins to tell us a story, a visionary story. And for those of us that look backwards, we go, wow, Steve really did know what he was doing. Now I get why everyone followed Steve. And we also take these stories around the world where we look for young people. A lot of kids love Elon Musk. We love James Dyson. Lately, I've been very enamored of a lot of our students have been going back to their home countries. So we had a number of kids go back to Shenzhen a few years ago, and I was lucky enough to go over there with Airbus. And I have to tell you, the amount of young people and the work they were doing, sitting there looking at hardware and software. And, it wasn't the kids at DJI or Tencent. It was the kids who were having lunch. They came out of their offices and they were talking about the radical things they could imagine. So we're actually taking the program right now and trying to insert it in more places around the world. As I mentioned, we've been working with companies. Companies have been devouring this knowledge. Armand, maybe you want to mention what a couple of universities have been doing with the Moonshot students. Maybe you mentioned I was thinking the Canadian school and then the Australian school.
Definitely. So actually one of the things I did when I graduated my program in industrial design is I went back and I wanted to really bring the knowledge and really this understanding of this new world and this new mindset and how to think big and bring it back to some of the students who, are going through a similar program or going through the same program. Because I felt that this knowledge that I had really helped me throughout my university. I was able to, and fortunate enough to meet Bill, work with the Moonshots at the time, SVIA at the time, and really be able to take these ideas further. And this kind of knowledge and this kind of understanding really helped in that academic setting. It really helped me take a project that would have just been a simple university project and not only 10x it, 100x it, but prove it out, but point to how it works in real life and how it's going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. And this is the kind of knowledge that really helps take an idea or a project from just a project, just an academic, just a school project, and take it to something completely beyond. And a lot of the things that I've been working on are now projects that I'm actively pursuing. Actually, Bill, side channel, I'm talking to one of our lawyer friends on patenting some of the ideas that have come out of these projects. So it's really something that I found really helped me in my university, really helped me in my post-secondary. And it's something that I wanted to bring to other students, let them have access to this power.
Yeah. So, I mean, the key for me is that I brought this program back to Stanford because I saw a need to get the youngest people we could affect to begin to want to change the world. And, whether they're engineers or business students or scientists or humanities students, historians, writers, learning, we started collecting them at the university and giving them this superpower. And we've now pushed at the university all the way down to the first year. And I'd say that our first year students get the most out of it. They begin to see how they can plan their 4 years of college because they envision their endpoint and plan it backwards. And then they tend to step one over and they talk about how they could look at what companies they might want to go into. So where could they maybe look for a job and plan back from there? We've had a number of students who've taken projects from the university and realized that they actually knew what to do with it. So they started a team and company in college. And we've had a number of them stay in college and do it. What we're now looking at doing is bringing it even further back before college. So for the last couple summers at Stanford, we've actually tried to extend it down to high school kids. 2 years ago, we taught, I think, 50 high school kids. Last year, it was 50 or 75. And we're trying to push it back even further. What we imagine is that if you take it to a student who's 15, 16, it allows them to develop a couple skills that are now seminal, critical to succeeding in the top universities. One, how do I bring a team together? Second, when I'm sitting at a blank whiteboard with my new team, where do we begin? How do we even begin? And then this is where the moonshot part starts to kick in. But what if we could go further? Why do we think we're constrained? What if we could change everything? What if we could be the team that's the most successful one? What if we could be the next Elon or Steve or Bezos? Or you could be Evan Spiegel, or you could be, we have all of these types of characters. we're trying to get the students to realize that they can envision the future and plan back from it. So it's a very tactical skill, and it's also a very strategic skill. But Mark, I think I saw a couple questions that were going on there. Did you want to try and jump to some?
Yes, great idea. Thank you, Bill. One of the first questions that came out is you mentioned back plan, and most
Yeah.
of us are not familiar with what a back plan is. Can you explain?
So when I adopted it, it was an old futurist trick. So it was developed in the 1950s in America. It's around from around the world. The idea is, let's plan as if we've already succeeded. So let's put ourselves out once our team has been funded, or let's hit our next milestone. Let's imagine that the product is already on the market and succeeding. So now from the future, let's look backwards and decide, how did we get there? Now, it turns out that there's a lot of work that's been used in the militaries around the world. Back planning is a very common tool. It turns out that industry has been using it for a handful of years. I used it at Apple back in the 1990s. We would look at it and go backwards. And right now there's a new book on it. So I can punch it into the channel if you give me a second, Mark. But there's a new book on how to do back planning the way Amazon's been doing it. And it's one of our core tenets is envision, and then let's talk about how we got there.
And I know you and Armin have been working with students from around the world and companies, introducing them to this moonshot thinking, telling them how to use it and deploy it. Is there like an amazing change you've observed in the students who go through this kind of process?
Armand, do you want to take that one?
Of course, definitely. That was in a very unique experience when I got to encounter Moonshots. The way it was done was I was going through the traditional coursework, but then we also had Moonshots. And the summer I spent there in the program, I really noticed the difference in talking to my peers and talking about big ideas with the people who went through both channels versus the people who only went through the traditional school. So it was almost like this whole other world and this whole other universe of knowledge existed as a complement to the traditional university path. And it really allowed us to see these ideas bigger. And even just when we're hanging around and just having a conversation, able to look at a news article and extract the information from it and be able to learn beyond what the author was writing and take it beyond and apply it to our own projects and apply it to other things that we're working on in Moonshots. So I found there's like almost a community that stemmed from this. And this is some of the work that Bill and I are doing, is really putting together this community in a way that can empower everybody around us, in a way that can empower and bring these other students, bring these other moonshot mindset pioneers along with us. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and I would just say, as an external old guy, what's so exciting is that the kids tend to show up the first day and they really don't have any expectation that this is going to change their, I mean, this is going to rock their world. What happens by the end of the program is that the teams, they just want to go, they want to go further. They don't want to stop. They're empowered. And we've given them the ability, every single person who goes to the program realizes they have a superpower. They understand that maybe they're the person who can communicate best to outsiders. Maybe they're the person who brings the team together. And they begin to realize how their superpowers work together. One of the things we've been doing in our program in the last 5 years is we take public challenges. So I mentioned we used the Dyson Challenge. The year before that, we used Eric Schmidt's challenge. For this summer, we're actually already looking at NASA has a new challenge. There's work coming from Bill Gates's new energy venture, Breakthrough Ventures. We have one from Microsoft. We like using public challenges that the teams can attack and can really work on. And then most importantly, they can submit. And once they finish like the weekend or the week, they're going to hear back from these challenge agencies. And this is what made us so excited when we had teams that, you know, they did some stuff in September, and then all of a sudden in late October, they get these emails back from Eric Schmidt's team saying, you guys did great. You win. You move forward. Come give us the next part. That's what we're really trying to get the students to achieve as well, is they already have the ability to change the world. and they should be competing for incubators. They should be competing to go to public challenges. These are all the kind of things that the students walk away with knowing they can do. And it really does change their entire mindset.
Sounds exciting. I certainly think if I was a high school kid and thinking about going to college and having all of these things I'm working on, my projects or community service contributions, that going through this Moonshot thinking program would let me do something more ambitious and more impactful that would not only make my college application more exciting, but it would give me skills that even into college and into my career beyond would make me more effective and more desirable to be on a team or even to be a leader. What do you think about that?
I think the nice part that we've been seeing in the last couple of years is that not only does the student get to say, hey, I did this program, but they get to say, and my team actually publicly applied our idea to a grand challenge, which of course, most of you recognize this language today. Grand challenges are the big ideas. Our students are applying to real competitions and real challenges so that the student can say, we actually delivered something. We took the time to deliver, and it's to a publicly accessible idea. Going further, as Armand was saying, we've been talking about working with students in schools to say, if you have a project in your senior year, in your junior year, if you have a capstone, why not try and bring this to the Moonshots world? Put a team around it and make it 10x better, or more importantly, make it at 100x better, and move it past just doing a paper. Move it so that you're really delivering on a plan, and you could tell me how to get there. And when we do longer programs, Armand and I did a 60-hour program with University in Perth in Australia last year. We actually had the students going out and talking to customers with their future prototypes, and it blew students away that they had actually built something from the future. The people believed them. So I think there's a lot of things that they can put together and hold tangibly and show success with that really does go a long way in saying, it's more than just the club you're talking about. It's more than just a class capstone. This is something external that you can really point to. And I can say that for the college students, this has become particularly true. Armand's taken a number of teams of industrial designers. He's got them chasing real projects, and they love doing it.
Great. Is there any age point or level of maturity you look for in saying this person is ready to do a Moonshot project? What's your opinion on that?
No, there's no age. There's no age. My son and I were talking. For some reason, he's got in his mind that he wants to do a space elevator. So he spent the last 4 days researching space elevators, and then he started prototyping a space elevator. And then we started reading The Economist yesterday and talking about energy at a distance and the fact that the Germans have created a hydrogen fuel. My son's 11, but he hangs out with us way too much. And he's actually been around a lot of our programs where we have the people looking far, and he realizes as an 11-year-old that people will value your idea if you help them go further, if you can tell them where your ability is. I'll tell you one part that we do find, no matter their age, doesn't matter what their interests are, it doesn't matter what experience they have, it doesn't matter whether they're a girl or a guy, they will learn and love working in a team. We make sure that the teamwork part, and we've actually got some people who think that's really the core value of Moonshots, is learning how to build teams that will change the world. So that's it. It doesn't matter who they are; they will be excited by it. They will get involved.
What do Moonshot sessions look like in terms of how long people usually engage on a Moonshot project, or how long does it take them to get a critical mass of understanding?
Armand and I last summer were trying to see how quickly we could generate new Moonshot thinkers. And we actually had people developing the mindset in the span of about an hour and a half. And immediately coming back to us going, that was great. What's next? And we were doing it over Zoom. We were doing it with kids in Africa, India. We were asked last year by the consultancy KPMG. Their Indian team brought us in to help them. KPMG runs a global challenge, and we were brought in to just push the Indian teams. I think I had 45 minutes to get the mindset, but once the teams had the mindset, I just took so many inbound emails and WhatsApps over the next 3 or 4 weeks because each team began to realize where it had a value to them. Where it continues, we've had one team from 2.5 years ago that worked and worked and worked on their moonshot idea. They knew it was going to make a difference. And yesterday, they said to us in one of our moonshot channels, we have a lot of channels and alumni. They said, we're about to deploy this week and we're about to raise money this week. We've had these other teams that have been working since December. We picked them up and we immediately said to them, you have a little project at school? What if we took that project and exploded it and just made it huge? And like I said, we've now got teams who are taking venture capital, teams who are looking at acquisitions. I mean, it was a couple weeks that they figured this out. So the real question is, where does the team want to go with it? I just saw a woman today, Armand, you'll recognize her from SVI 18. We had a girl today who just got her perfect job as a lawyer post-college. We met her when she was, I think, an undergrad, and she's now finished her law degree. This is exactly what she wanted to do in life, and this is how she got there. The funniest one, I'll tell you, I had a talk with the team in December. This was a team who they've been struggling to get their idea. People just didn't get it. They'd been struggling at getting customers to understand it. I think I talked to them for like 30 minutes over WhatsApp. And I just read an article 2 days ago. They've got 100 customers. They've raised $4 million. And I pinged the guy who I talked to. He said, oh, hey, I guess you guys figured your life out. And I can find the quote for you. It literally says, the thing that made the difference is when you told us we should focus on our moonshot version of our idea, that gave us our ability to realize where we should go. So I thought that was pretty funny. But I think for younger people, Mark, it really does give them a knowledge of how powerful they are as young people, of where they can make a difference. And as they take that into applications and into colleges, this is the thing that will help them succeed in their first classes. This will help them find the team to attack their projects. This will give them the ability to say, what do I want to achieve here at the university? And how can I start on that path? And then if the path diverges, it's okay. I can look at where my vision was and decide what I want to change and move my vision. I would have loved to have had that in college, by the way, Mark.
Right. Right, and you had more of it than any of us so far.
No, you don't want to hear my story, right? Like most of us, the student that goes, what am I doing and why? Yeah.
Yes. Hey, Kathy, would it be meaningful for us to talk about the programs that Bill and Armin have pulled together?
So this was an outline of what we really came up with over the course of a 5-day program. Now, the weekend program, it's being spread out between each day of a Saturday, and you're still capturing a lot of the same information, and you're getting the exact same experience as you would within a week. And we're taking different measures and we're approaching it in a slightly different way, so we can make sure that if you're going for the weekend program or if you're going for the week-long program, end of the day, you're still getting the same information and you're getting the same takeaways and you're getting the same invitation to the Moonshots experience. And the way we broke it down is into 5 days. Now, this is based on a lot of the different programs we were running. As Bill mentioned, the program that we ran in Australia last summer, among a few others. And we broke it down to 5 topics, which is mindset, vision, bet, taking bet, proving it, and advancing to the next stage. And the way the program is broken up is into a morning session with a 1-hour break, and then you have the afternoon session. And I can walk you through all of this. I can share it with the SVF team, who can then disperse it through the channels. But really, the way a week would go is you're getting an introduction to the mindset. First days first, we want you to learn how to really speak the language, the universal language of innovation. That's how I like to put it. How do you, think like a world-class leader? How do you put these ideas into context? How do you plan for the future? And what's beautiful about a lot of this is it's applying to the work that you're doing, but it's also applying to a lot of the other avenues in your life, as Bill was mentioning. You can apply these to anything from a university application to, and this is what I do, apply it to some personal aspects in my life. The next is really capturing the vision, capturing a big picture, observing what currently exists. And what we love to do is practice sharing this vision. Because the way we see it is when you're sharing your vision, you're sharing a story. Everything that you're talking about, everything that you're sharing is a story. It's a progress through this narrative. And we want to make sure that students can leave with that power and leave with that key to be able to explore their story. They can explain it to somebody in 30 seconds. They can explain it to somebody in an elevator. They can explain it to somebody sitting across from them in a subway. Just something that they can easily explain and capture this vision. The next is really looking at foundations of teamwork, designing a project roadmap, building a prototype that you can even take to investors and start raising capital. Bill has an amazing story about how he raised, I forgot how much money, on a cardboard prototype. It was a piece of cardboard. He was able to raise millions of dollars just by taking a piece of cardboard and telling a story. And it was enough to capture people's imaginations.
I've got a better one, Armand. I've got a better
Oh,
one
you do?
from. Do you know the Taiwan story? Where I flew
No.
over on I flew over on EVA Air to Taiwan. I arrive at the 6 a.m. Right, you sleep all night. It's 6 a.m. I'm in Taipei, and I've got a meeting that's supposed to be at like 10 o'clock. Then it moves to like 1 o'clock, and I was sitting around at this person's house. I was invited to their house now at like 8 o'clock at night, eating fruit. And the investor said, well, show me what you want to do. So I showed her the vision. She went, okay, here's how much I'll give you. Here's how much I want of the company. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was back on the plane home that night at midnight. that was a fun day. But it was vision. The key was vision, right? If you can have a vision, you can bring a team around you. Investors want a vision so that when the team has to change the idea, when the team has to pivot or try a different prototype, that they've still got the energy to keep going in that direction. They're still going to be able to explain what they want to do.
I'm actually going to keep that story and use that in place of the cardboard. I love that. That's amazing.
No, the cardboard one's fun. I got a picture of that.
And as Bill was mentioning, it's building off more of the vision. And in order to be able to capture this vision, you need the mindset. So a lot of these bleed into each other and lead into each other. The next day would really be proving the concept. How do you store all this amazing work that you've done in a way that you can call back and reference to it? You don't want to just throw it all out. How do you, create this origin story for your team? How do you archive for the future, but also how do you create the perfect presentation, perfect length that really speaks to the context of what you want to talk about? And this ties into submitting to these larger challenges like the Microsoft Challenge. This ties into being able to create a specific contextual presentation for that specific need, and using all these tools and bits and pieces that you have to assemble a presentation that you can then take to anyone from a university to a VC to a challenge. And really, ultimately, we want to lead up to day 5, which is being able to practice this presentation. We want to be able to have students come up and explain their vision and explain it to somebody who hasn't really had a look into the moonshot mindset. Because ultimately, if you can explain it to the world, that you got it. That's what you need. And what do you do with that idea next? We don't want to just leave students with this amazing idea in their hands. We want to be able to say, look, you've captured this incredible breakthrough. You've come up with this amazing concept. You have this awesome team that we've helped you form. What's next? What do you want to do with this idea? What do you want to apply it to? And all this, as insane as it sounds that we can fit it within 5 days, that's the beauty of it. We're able to fit this over the course of 5 days. And in the afternoon, which would be the gray area underneath, this is where we bring in people from our community. This is where we bring in speakers and startups that work with the Moonshots, and they can come in and share. So students are able to see real world examples, real world, relevant, modern, existing, relevant to now examples of what they will be doing, of what they can do with this power that we're giving them.
One comment, I was just typing something, there was Shark Tanks. We actually, we run into Shark Tanks a lot, and we actually run into hackathons a lot too. In most cases, culturally, we're just very different from Shark Tanks. We are not trying to destroy a person's idea. We're not sharking them. We're not ripping them apart. What we want them to do is to take the energy from being able to envision and build the plan and keep going. And if their idea is to work on science for the next 15 years and develop a new technology and a new ability that would never be invested in today, good. A lot of our people at the universities, actually, I mean, I've got a lot of my students who are researchers, and what this gives them is it gives them the ability to decide where their research is going to go, and which is a nice part. We have a lot of people we work with who are in what's traditionally called the impact space, where they want to create a movement or they want to create a new way of thinking, things that aren't traditionally investable. We want the student to take control of that, to realize that they're going to make the difference, and that it's their job to bring along investors and other employees and governments and whoever they can work with. Because of the way we have the students learn to build a team and really deliver their vision, we find that they're not usually in the situation where investors look at them and go, no, I've seen 3 of those. Instead, the students are much more in a position where the investor says, gosh, I don't normally invest in this, but I mean, just keep talking. This is amazing. I want to be part of your team. So it's really about this. The reason we call it the Moonshots program, Mark, and this is the reason you and I were chatting before the call, what the students are doing in the project is not the Moonshots. The Moonshots are the students. See, we're just giving these kids the power, the ability to launch themselves into their entire career. If you imagine today's young kids are going to live to be 100, 120, 130, imagine what happens if at the age of 15, we give them the ability to imagine they've changed things, to know that they can do it, to believe they can pull a team together, to know that everything they want to do. I mean, imagine they had as much arrogance as Steve Jobs or Elon, in a good way, right? The good arrogance. This is the Moonshots. The Moonshots are the kids. We're launching them into the future. So I think we've got a lot of questions there. Do we get any other questions? Yeah, go,
So
Kathy.
what's the difference between design thinking and the moonshot?
Oh, that's easy. So I come out of the group that invented design thinking. I was there in the early days, and I know exactly what they did. Design thinking was invented for people to really solve problems. It was meant to say, we've got a problem, and let's figure out how the user is having that problem. So the first thing we have to do is find the problem. And the second thing we have to do is look at the user, or invert them. Let's go look at a user and find their problem. And it is it is the best process for kind of how you get from just looking at engineering issues or just looking at a product and really trying to understand how would we make this work for a user. The reason that we created the Moonshots program, it's actually spun out of the same group, right? So I come from that group at Stanford. What we looked at was we were instead coming out of the idea, which was, well, what if there isn't a user yet? What if it's, I don't know, a flying car? So 10 years ago, we had a student who is an amazing design thinker walk into our course at Stanford and say, I want to build flying cars. User need analysis doesn't work. There's nothing to ask for. There's no problem with users yet. So what he did was he started with, well, how would you envision it? And where would the markets be? And who would the competitors be? Of course, you guys know right now there's flying car companies. Likewise, this is the classic quote from Steve Jobs, right? When they set out to do the iPhone, they could never have asked the user what their problem was. There was no problem the iPhone was solving. The iPhone was so revolutionary new. Likewise, for those of us that are at the right age, I mean, you remember the first time you saw like a Macintosh or the first time you drove in a Tesla. They were just so new. They weren't solving a problem. They were changing the way we all think. So where we look at is we push very far. And then as the students get better at their idea and are bringing it closer in, we have them look at design thinking. We have them look at business model canvas. For the right teams, we have them look at how to do fundraising. So all of those other tools, how to do OKRs, if you like OKRs or KPIs, we teach all of those as tools that you can deliver your vision with. So they mix together in the sense that once you've got your vision and your team and you plan how to get there, now you can use design thinking, you can use your business model canvas, you can use all those other tools that students are going to pick up in their different classes. And I think there was a question earlier about whether there was any particular area of interest for the students. No, we actually find any kind of student works this way, whether they want to be historians or humanists or scientists or whatever. One of our good colleagues is actually he's an anthropologist. He studies ancient England, and he is superb at helping students go further.
One is if you can provide some examples of how you help students in different stages of the Moonshot project.
Let me go from the top, actually. So I'm this one. Do I get self-selected students who usually are having strong initiatives? Yes and no. The self-selected students very quickly realize that they're mostly full of shit and they need to actually learn to work with a team better. And those kids end up learning how to be leaders, first and foremost. The students who come in who don't have ideas normally, they're not the person who gets to the front of the room. Our program tends to show them where their superpower is. They learn what they love doing because they get to practice so many different skills. When you're trying to look to the future and anything's possible, you could become the communicator. You could become the person who tells the story right. You could become the person who thinks about the marketplace right. So we find that even the non-self-starters enjoy the work and they do come out of it with something. Do we see difficult dynamics with teams? Yes. The research group I'm actually in at Stanford, where design thinking came from, is actually also a group that studies how teams work. You'll find that we've got a whole 40 years of research that was originally funded by DARPA and Apple and things. And team dynamics is always a problem. Armand and the other coaches that we have, they know how to go through it. We get the teams working because it's not, there's no reason to fight each other. When you're envisioning the future, the thing is you have ideas. There's no losers. Our entire team can figure out how to put ideas together in a new way. It's not my idea or your idea. It's, well, if we've got two ideas, let's put them together and make an even bigger idea. So we find that team conflicts really go away when you teach the people that it's about ideas, not personally. Can we provide specific examples of how you help students step by step? What ideas the students come up with, what guidance you provided, how to, yeah, there's a lot of it. I mean, so we've got a lot of them. One of the easy ones, well, I mean, again, is it a short version or a long version? So one of the short versions we came up with last year is we worked with the teams to say, Eric Schmidt has put out a public challenge. This was in September. So the first thing we did was we had the teams read it, and then we showed them how to take their ideas and put them in what's called a multi-horizon model. How to tell whether an idea is achievable today, possible in the near term to midterm, in research, which means the team could now go look up research and decide what was bounding research, and then finally push out to find crazy ideas from like books or science fiction. And using this tool, it's called a horizon model. You'll recognize most companies use it. Lenovo, very publicly, about 4 years ago, the CEO of Lenovo came out and said, we use a multi-horizon model. He called it a wave model. And he proceeded to announce his quarterly earnings in it for what was it, 2 years. I can send you the links. We taught the student this framework the first morning, and Armand can attest that the students immediately understood how to benchmark their idea, how to benchmark other solutions out there. And then we worked with them when we coached them to push their ideas even further and to bring as many ideas forward. So as I mentioned, the way each day works is we introduce a short lesson or a tool or a way of thinking. We then send the teams off where they practice and use it on a real problem. And then we immediately come back with our coaches and have them explain it to us, explain it to each other. This practice model, it's called a triple loop. They hear it, they apply it, and then they reflect and try to communicate it. This is core to learning. We do that with the Four Horizons model, and it blows students away as to how much that simple tool set can help. We then find that now this multi-horizon model allows the students to go read things from other research journals and immediately talk about where it fits. And we find the teams can then talk to each other. So it's one of the simple tools we use. And even today, I can walk into companies we work with and they'll go, oh, that new project we're doing, that's Horizon 3, and this one's Horizon 2. Curiously enough, you'll know that in addition to Lenovo, and that's the CEO, Facebook is using a Horizons model. Very publicly, Mark Zuckerberg has used it in presentations, and we know that internally they are also using it. So it's a nice model that translates into industry, but the kids pick it up like that.
Oh, sorry. No, I was going to just share, Leah, I had this really nice example. I always love to use this example. It's the Global Impact Team, Bill, 2019.
Yeah.
When they came to us, they had this idea. They had a direction they want to go in. And then they said, awesome. So we have $15,000 that we're going to give a developer. And then I looked at them. I'm like, what are you making the developer build? And they said, our platform. So then as I started asking them questions, they were saying, okay, well, we don't have an answer for that. We don't have an answer for this. And what we did was we said, okay, let's keep what you have. You have this amazing idea. And KJ sent a he calls it a shameless plug. I love shameless plugs. He sent that in the chat. I can speak to that offline as well. But what happened was we sort of said, okay, let's keep what you have. Let's apply the mindset. Let's start looking at these tools. Let's see how we can work this project and send it out into the future and build upon this. And I think they actually might be launching an app soon. So I've been helping this team on and off. They've been part of our Moonshot network for a bit. And I've been helping them on and off for a while. I haven't really looked at the updates yet, but I believe they're launching an app soon. So they have this idea. They're coming forward and saying, we're ready to spend a bunch of money to make it work. What we did was said, hold on to your money. Let's work on this. Let's figure out how to 10x, 100x it, and let's build this together. And that's what we ended up doing with them. So it's
similar. So Armand, let me give you a concrete example, guys. Eric Schmidt last year put out a challenge and said, how would you change the future of learning? We had a lot of teams go after it. We had a number of teams win, and 2 of the teams took it forward. One of the teams that we're working with right now is actually raising money. The other team is about to ship a new prototype. The one team decided to work on social emotional learning. This is the problems that young children have when they can't communicate their emotions. And what they decided to do was build a small toy that little children could put faces on, little sticky faces. So when the parent finds a little child who's having a tantrum, they say, look, take your toy, and here's all these little faces that are pre-made. Put the face on the toy. Show me what you're feeling. And then here's where it got very impressive. Then the parent can pick up their iPad, take a picture of the little character, the little doll with the face on it, the angry face or the throw, whatever the child made but can't communicate. And immediately, using visual recognition, the iPad will bring the character to life. And now the little character they've programmed it so, if it has a frowny face, the little character will help the child talk about a story where the child had, I'm the little angry monster. Here's the problem I had with it. This team proposed the idea to Schmidt Ventures. They were one of the early winners. They've turned it into a full prototype for their capstone class in a Stanford Masters. They've then launched a company, and they're actually in fundraising right now. So and it started with this vision first type of stuff. Like, what would our vision be? What if we could help little children communicate their emotions? So that was where we did it. And this is one of the teams. We have another team called Field Trip that's doing something completely different and also crazy cool, but it started in the same place. Let's go after the Schmidt Ventures. Let's submit. Let's put our idea out there. Let's get critique on it, and then let's start building towards it. So we have a lot of examples. And these are real companies too. So if you want to meet if you have any interest in the social emotional learning, is 2 women out of Stanford University. I can make an introduction. They're amazing. They've got an incredible deck. And this gets back to, where do you go with Moonshots? These 2 women have built prototypes. They've got a story deck. They've got a fundraising deck. They've got financials. We didn't require them to do that. They just chose to keep going from this challenge. And we help them. We have friends helping them with IP. We have friends helping, people want to help people that are going to change the world. So I do have to go at some point, Mark. So we should have another chat later, right? So
Definitely. Kathy?
Yeah, Bill, this is really awesome. And we all know you took this moonshot globally, inspired many, many young people. Could you share some examples from China to Taiwan to, India, Pakistan, Australia?
Yeah, I mean, so Armand is a Canadian, just so you know. He could wave his hand, right? We were just on the phone today with a team from Australia who has their program going. We've run down there. Like I mentioned, we've done a lot of work in India and Pakistan. I happen to have taken the program around the world to Singapore, Sweden, China. We've been in China multiple times working with teams there. We're actually talking about doing a variant of the Moonshots program with USTC. We have a good colleague at USTC. We're also working with, if you know, SEED, SEED, there's 3 E's, incubator down in Shenzhen. Violet down there, she's been a good fan of ours for a while. So we worked with students from everywhere. We found that language is not a barrier. Culture is not a barrier. Every group of young people around the world knows they should do this. We just empower them. That's all it really comes down to. And I think the nice part is, there's just, now that we're using a lot more of this public community, we're trying to tie a lot of these dialogues together. So that's actually a project Armand and I are working in the background, is that once a student finishes the Moonshot program, it's not a class, it's a community. So the moment they finish, they get invited to join our many, many, many communities. We have lots of online groups talking constantly, every day and every night. We have 2 new women. One of the women is from our Swiss program, and one of the women is from our Australian program. And they're about to launch a book club this week. And they're going to basically talk about Bill Gates's new book as it applies to moonshot thinking. If you haven't read Bill G's new book, he basically says, we've got to have breakthroughs. It's the only way to do it. We've got to think big. He's created a new venture group called Breakthrough Ventures to fund this. It's very much like Eric Schmidt's new venture group. It only focuses on big. So the girls decided that they wanted to talk about this book. Great. They're inviting lots of people in to talk about it. So once the students go through the program, again, it's not a class, it's a community. So if the students, go away for a little bit because they have to drop back into classes, we're there in the summer. If they come back over in the winter and they've got a new idea, hell, we'll help them find a team. I mean, that's what Moonshots does, is it's just this big community of people who have a shared language and have a shared mindset of, let's change the goddamn world. And there are a lot of great people like me on the network. 30 years in the Valley, I have friends from Apple and DARPA, and we've got all these networks who just love helping the young people. So it's really a kind of piece too, where it's global, it extends over time. So if the kids come in and join into it, they really drop into a community of big innovators, and they don't go away. We don't lose them. We try not to lose them. People come back.
Thank you so much. We know you have to go. This is very inspirational.